say that civil war? I know you've come up with different definitions here, and you've acknowledged that already. But does it have to be really strictly between elites? Kind of more like the English Civil War, the monarch versus a kind of quasi rival monarch. I mean, is it really a war between elites technically, or two elite factions, or am I wrong on that? I mean, is that one definition?
I mean, I don't know, what exactly are you asking? Will there be elite?
No, I'm asking. Actually, are we? It's kind of I'm asking. I should have asked it 2 questions ago. Really, I'm saying, are we wrong to think about in terms of civil war? Because actually, that is actually a war between. If you look at the English Civil War, it's what we're talking about now is not similar at all, as far as I can see. It's basically what I'm saying. That was Parliament saying, right, the king's gone too far. We need to put him back in his place. Okay, maybe even cut his head off. But that was very different from unrest on the street and violence on the street. That was an elite conflict, essentially. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't seem much like that, this current situation.
No. Again, I think of my sort of the thing that forms in my mind again is much more like the set of wars that happened in the former Yugoslavia. Sometimes one of the factions might be the Serbian government and the Serbian army, right? Another time, the faction might just be a town of people where the menfolk get together, get themselves armed and form a paramilitary, create their own leadership structure, right? It will be very messy. It will be I suspect it will be extremely chaotic. It will be sort of all things going on at once. That's what it was like in the Balkans.
Right. Yeah, I'm worried about my internet connection during this period. I mean, some people I've seen ask what side will the government be on? I mean, that's a strange question because we've seen so far the government sides against British people in basically every instance. But then again, you could almost just see them staying out of it. And you could also see them capitulating on some things quite quickly, as we've just seen with the Epping hotel closure. Turns out, you haven't got proper planning permission. Okay, we'll close it. Sometimes they can capitulate quite quickly. Do you see the government sort of taking a role in this purely hypothetical scenario, YouTube, but do you see the government taking a role or taking a side or just sort of staying out of it?
No, it will certainly be involved. There's no way it won't be. And I think that if and when it comes to a hot conflict, it depends who's in government at that point, right? If there's a government that's like what we've had, a traitorous, globalist, anti-nativist government at that point, then they won't be on our side. They won't be on the side of the native Brits. But if there's a government in power at that time, which is nationalist or something, then you would expect they would do something like Milosevic. They would be on the side of the native people. It just all depends, doesn't it? Again, we don't know what the future will hold. I think if history teaches us anything, it's that it's very, very difficult to predict how things will play out. Right. Well, one little example of that maybe is: do you remember the Canadian election fairly recently?
Yeah.
It looked completely set that Trudeau's party must lose that election. Right. And then just with a few days to go, wasn't it? Or a week or two before it happened, Trump came out, made some statements, changed the entire landscape politically in Canada, and suddenly it flipped and Trudeau's party's got another lease of life. Like, you wouldn't have seen that coming. You wouldn't have bet on that. I mean, that's just one tiny example, but often the way things go, especially with things like civil unrest or civil wars or whatever, is very often they can flip on turn on a dime. Events play out very unpredictably. Again, a chaos type of chaos, bits of anarchy, little eddies of crazy events going on. If you look at the detail of the French Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution, very, very, very difficult to predict how they would play out just before they kicked off. Impossible, really. Again, I think we're looking at something like that.
Yeah. You never know which events will kick things off. You had Southport last year and suddenly people just had enough. But other times, horrible things happen and nothing happens. So Yeah, of course you're right. It's all hypothetical. It's all just guesswork. We're not saying all this will happen. Um, and though in a way something's already happening, Epping protests and so on, and we've got this flag movement now, which is quite interesting. It's peaceful. People are just putting up flags, and it's quite interesting. It's kind of smoking out the left in a sense because Paul Mason, for example, was incredibly threatened just by the flag of the nation we're in being put up, and he said it's aggressive, it's military, and all this kind of thing. And so, do you think this is a significant movement? These flags being put up, and what's your take on these flags emerging everywhere around the country?
I think it's of significance. Yeah, I don't think it's sort of giant significance. I think it's just one step in the ladder of events, right? And so I think maybe future historians, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, a PhD student perhaps, who's tasked with drilling down into the minutiae of exactly what happened and in what order, this flag event we're living through right now will be mentioned somewhere in a very thick textbook. But is it like a massive game-changing giant moment? Right? Probably not. Probably not. But it's part of a process. I mean, we're always living in a process. It's different. We're all doomed because of the arrow of time. We're all doomed to live purely in the moment, in the present. The future is entirely unknown to us, and we can look back on the past and not agree on it at all. Right? That's how we live. That's reality. So, is this flag thing significant? Yeah, I think it's significant. Yeah, as you say, it's sort of you said sort of smoking out the left in some way, but it is only still early days in the process. If we do end up in a sort of a nightmare situation like Lebanon or Yugoslavia, we're still right at the beginning, really, of that process. So yeah, I think it's of significance, but in the vast sweep of history, probably not all that big. That's what I think.
Do you agree with me that you mentioned the Civil War, American Civil War? Do you agree with me that the England flag's become a bit like the Confederate flag? It suddenly came to me the other day, and I just tweeted it because they were taking it down. I suddenly thought, yeah, this flag is a kind of nuisance to the authorities, but it's a kind of arcane, quasi-racist thing. Like, why didn't we conquer this years ago? Not so much necessarily the Union Jack, but the St. George's Cross. To me, it seems like a kind of nuisance to them along the lines of the Confederate flag. Am I along the right lines there, do you think?
I don't see many parallels between the St George's flag and the South's flag, but other than that, I think you're right to sort of make some sort of parallel in that our enemies absolutely hate it. They hate it. I make quite a strong distinction between the Union flag and the St George's Cross, because the Union, they're very different things, really. They stand for very, very different things, and I think even in the minds of our political enemies, they stand for very different things. The St George's Cross, they don't like. They really don't like, because that is England, right? It's not this. It's not this sort of kind of this. I was going to say ethereal. That's not really the right word, but it's not this union of crowns. It's not this union of nations. But it's much more easy to make the argument that anyone can be a member of it. No. The English are sort of it's a racial and ethnic identity. It's an ancient thing, and it's exclusive. It is exclusive, right? You can't be born to two Indian parents, come here, and be English. You can't do it. It doesn't make sense. That's not. It's just not. It's not possible. And they can't really even make that argument. You can say, "Oh, I'm part of the empire. My ancestors have been part of the empire or the Commonwealth for a long time. I was born in Britain. Okay, I support the Union Jack. Fine. Okay, it's a little bit difficult to demolish that argument. But say that that they're English, right? I came here on Windrush, or my parents came here in the 70s. And now I'm English, like Rishi Sunak. He's English. Well, he's not. I'm afraid.
Yeah, I said that to
Lord
Lord
Frost. They hate it. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I thought you'd finish. I said that to Lord Frost, that, yeah, Richard Sunak's not English. Not that I'm obsessed with it, but it's important not to have polite lies. We saw how that went with the trans movement. We can't really afford polite lies. So, no, he's not English. to do what you will with that information, but I'm not going to just buy into a polite lie. And he seemed to think, talking to Frost, he seemed to think it was just sort of, he called it weird. Maybe weird to make it your whole life obsession, but it's
They're the one forcing the issue, Nick. They're the one saying you can't be English. Englishness doesn't exist. And also, we are English. And don't you dare fly the St. George's flag. They're the one forcing the issue. We were quite happy, weren't we, in our higher trust, polite society, to not really hardly ever fly the St. George's cross apart from in a big football tournament. We was happy to live in a society like that. They're the one forcing it, where they will fly a Palestinian flag or whatever, but we're not allowed the St. George's flag.
Yeah.
They're the one forcing the issue.